Welcome back to News Talk. Tax day is coming, and as happens every year, residents of the District of Columbia will pay taxes to a government, the federal government, that doesn't recognize them as full citizens. Joining us now to talk about what's planned for this year's tax day observance, Kimberly Perry. She's Executive Director of DC Vote. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks very much for coming in. How do you plan to mark and make the most of the April 15th tax day, which doesn't actually come on April 15th, and the reason for that we can talk about in a moment. But what's planned? What do you hope can come from raising the flag on a day where people are thinking about their relationship, citizen to government?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got an interesting opportunity this year. Americans across the country get 3 extra days to file their taxes. I know people are cheering, but all because of the District of Columbia. We have a local or state holiday, as we like to call it, DC Emancipation Day. And so it's April 16th that needs to be observed and will be observed on Friday, April 15th. So the IRS has pushed that tax day to Monday, the 18th. So we're celebrating that really by raising awareness of the fact that we are tax-paying citizens of this country, but we have absolutely no representation in the United States Congress, and if we all band together, we can change it.
What do you hope to do in terms of just sort of granular being out there so that people know that you're continuing to press this fight?
Yeah, we want residents from across the region to join us in Washington, D.C. We'll meet at the corner of 14th and Pennsylvania Avenue at Freedom Plaza, 9:30 Friday morning. We want neighborhoods of residents to bring signs that mock-up of their tax forms to prove and show and further articulate that, again, we pay taxes just like everybody else, actually some of the highest taxes in the country, and don't have representation. We'll have a series of speakers hear stories about the negative impact of the district not having full representation and what congressional interference actually looks like. We'll march up Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol on the west side, where actually we'll be joined, and this is sort of a new development, but an important one, by Democracy Spring organizers, where Democracy Spring is a combination of over 200 progressive groups and activists from across the country descending on D.C. to send a message: one voice, one vote is important right now. We need to get big money out of politics, and we'd like to overturn Citizens United. It's the perfect message to couple with that of freedom and full justice and democracy for those here in the District of Columbia.
There's been a lot of research and analysis about how this country treats the residents of its capital compared with how many other countries treat the residents of their capital cities, and really we stand alone. I don't think there's any denying that there's a stark difference and an unfair difference in terms of the District of Columbia compared to any other capital.
Right.
My question for you, though, is why? Why do you think this still is?
That's the big question. Listen, it's absolutely unbelievable for most of the international community as well as Americans here. We know that more than 58% of Americans have absolutely no idea we're disenfranchised. When you go a little bit further and let them know that our budget and our local budget and every single one of our local laws has to be approved by the U.S. Congress, they think that's outrageous, and 78% say they're willing to help. Those numbers are further exacerbated by our friends in the international community who cannot believe that a country that touts democracy and goes very far to try to bring democracy to other countries has this huge blemish. And again, rallying people around this message, educating them to help us change it.
You have to have some theory as to why this persists. Is it race? Is it hatred there's always, it seems, some reason for folks outside the Capitol to hate Washington. So do residents of the capital city get lumped in with that sort of negative view people have? I mean, as much as folks love to come here and look at the monuments, they sort of hate a lot of what Washington represents.
Yeah.
Is it race? What do you think the problem is?
Well,
what do you think the problems are?
Yeah, you very well know that the reason has changed over time, right? There was a time when race played a huge role in the perception by congressional lawmakers about who lived in the city and what their ability and capacities were. But right now, a few things really challenge us. One is just the simple fact that this has been a fight and a grievance between the residents of D.C. and the Congress. But we have no power. They don't listen to us. We can't hold them accountable. So we've got to educate and rely on our friends across the country to help us solve this problem, and they've got to put additional pressure on congressional lawmakers to do so. The second thing we really have to do is help people understand who we are, that we are an American community. We raise our families here. We make decisions about our education system, our vulnerable transportation system, and we work jobs. We want fair wages just like they do. A lot of people think that Washington, D.C. is just filled with congressional politicos, high-paid lobbyists, and that we have some undue influence. And that really doesn't exist. So making ourselves relatable to other American communities across the country will really help us bring more people on board and put additional national pressure on the Congress.
Is it legitimate in your view, or is it disloyal to take this fight, this grievance, which does, after all, tie in and have echoes in the very founding of the Republic, why we separated from our forebears and became a nation of our own? Is it legitimate in your view, or is it disloyal to take this fight to international bodies and, in essence, try to shame the U.S. on the world stage?
I think that's happening already. I think the more...
And you think it's legit?
I think it's fair. I think it's a fair argument and debate to be having at this point. Look, our democracy is in a very vulnerable state right now. You just mentioned it in your previous segment. Lots of people are taking a second look at our democracy, what it means, what the fundamental principles of that democracy are. And so I think we're going to have a chance to finally elevate our issue and make sure that it's part of that national debate about who's enfranchised and how we protect and expand voter participation instead of suppressing it. Our time is coming. I think this Friday is going to be a great part of maintaining that momentum we've been seeing over the last few years.
Don't let me end this conversation without you giving out information about where people can find out more of the details about Friday. Yeah. I want to ask you the same question I asked D.C. Council Chairman Phil Mendelson the other day, which was on the budget autonomy fight. Yeah. A big win for the city in terms of the city's ability to continue to provide services and spend its own locally raised funds, even if there's some, again, future, as we've seen in the past, some future battle between a president and a Congress, and the federal government shuts down. No reason that the city should be treated as a federal agency if that should occur. Is this the last word? Is this last victory that the city won kind of the last word as far as you're concerned, or is budget autonomy still something that needs to be fought for?
We think it's the law of the land. The Superior Court ruled 2 weeks ago that it is the law of the land. Come January, as the chairman has already mentioned, the council and the mayor will put forth a budget, send it to Congress just as they would any other law, not to become part of the federal appropriations process. And come October 1, we'll be spending our local tax dollars as we see fit. We believe this is the law of the land. D.C. residents have fought for the last 4 years to see this come to fruition. Should any opposition come into play right now, we'll continue to fight just as hard as we have been the last 4 years to see it through to the end. We deserve this. Self-determination in this city is strong. The Washington Post did a poll last fall that showed 67% of D.C. residents feel that statehood is symbolic, and they want to see us freed from congressional hold, and we'll do all that we need to do to continue to elevate it.
Can you talk about the passing this weekend of someone who has led the fight for the District of Columbia, particularly on the statehood front, for a very long time?
I can. We lost our friend, our champion of statehood, and an advocate and activist for many progressive issues, Jerry Clark. He founded and was chair of the D.C. Statehood Coalition. What I think is most unique about Jerry, and what we will miss so dearly about him, is that he worked to bring people together across the city. Didn't matter what corner of the city you lived in. If you believed in freedom for the district, he wanted you to put your egos aside, sit at a table, talk to each other, coordinate when possible, and remember that we all have the same end goal, and that is to free D.C. and achieve the rights we know we deserve. And so he'll just be greatly missed to so many of us.
Can you let folks who are listening now know where they can get more information about the events that are coming up?
Thank you so much for that.
To the statehood?
Absolutely. Folks should go to DCTaxDayProtest.org. I'll say that again, taxdayprotest.org, and you can find out when we're meeting on Friday morning, 9:30, Freedom Plaza. We'll march together with a united message to the west side of the Capitol for a continued 11:30 rally with Democracy Spring organizers, and really send a loud message to the world that the nation's capital needs to be freed.
And I hope you'll make a stop at that electronic sign in front of the Wilson building that
calculates our taxes.
Taxes paid without representation in Congress. Kimberly Perry, Executive Director of DC Vote, thank you so much for coming by. Have a good event this week. Thanks for coming in as always. Up next, as we continue, Maryland lawmakers wrap up their annual legislative session in Annapolis, and we'll talk with County Executive Rashawn Baker.